Okay. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. My name is Pat Shearer. I'm the acting Sergeant at Arms today. So if we could have everybody please stand for the invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance. Father Joe Boisel, would you please lead us in the invocation?
Happily. I thought I would choose a prayer for our nation, considering all that we've been through in the last couple of weeks, or certainly last several days. So will you pray with me? Almighty God, who has given us this good land for our heritage, we humbly beseech thee we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of thy favor and glad to do thy will. Bless our land with honorable industry, sound learning, and pure conduct. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil way. Defend our liberties and fashion into one united people the multitudes brought hither out of many kindreds and tongues. Endue with the spirit of wisdom those to whom in thy name we entrust the authority of government, that there may be justice and peace at home, and that through obedience to thy law we may show forth thy praise among the nations of the earth. In the time of prosperity, fill our hearts with thankfulness, and in the day of trouble, suffer not our trust in thee to fail. All of which we ask through your name. Amen.
And we'll do pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Number one. Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number four, and now we'll turn it over to our club president, Kelly Brennan.
Thanks, Pat. Good afternoon. Yep. Can do. And Jim, do you have a minute? I'm just going to have you come up. Yeah, we'll just do it now. Yeah. If everybody could come on in, take a seat. We'll introduce our speaker and then we'll do announcements at the end of the program.
Probably right. This is weird to say good afternoon, Rotarians, but we are saying good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to have Tom Vince here today. And let me give a little bit of a background, some information about Tom if you don't already know it. Tom Vince came to Hudson in 1969 to be head of the Hudson Library and Historical Society and spent 26 and a half years as director of that institution when it was located on Aurora Street. I had an office up there with Hudson Job Search right next to Tom's apartment, which is in the attic, I think, right? In 1996, he went to Western Reserve Academy to be their archivist and historian, and went from a location that was in the attic of one building into a temperature-controlled special location for the archives in the John D. Ong Library that opened in 2000. He recently retired after spending 28 years at Western Reserve Academy. Tom is a former president of the Rotary Club of Hudson, the Hudson Heritage Association, and the Cuyahoga Valley Civil War Roundtable. He spent 25 years as a volunteer for Hudson Community Television, where he did a segment called Moment in Hudson History and served on many boards and committees for the Old Village of Hudson and the city. He was the Hudson Chamber of Commerce Citizen of the Year in 2009. He has been active as a lector, usher, and resurrection choir member at St. Mary's. He holds degrees from 3 universities. He's been honored by the Ohio Senate in Columbus and more recently by the Ohio House of Representatives. But what have you done for us recently, Tom? Okay, yeah. So with great pleasure, I introduce Tom Vince. You don't have to, I'll bring this down to you.
Yes. Thank you, Jim. I just would rather be closer to those I'm speaking to. So on the morning of December the 2nd, 1859, John Brown left the jail in which he had been staying in what is now West Virginia. He went out to be hanged, and as he was going out the door, he handed a small piece of paper to the jailer, and it had these words on it. In fact, I don't think he really meant for it to become a historic document, but in fact, he wrote, "I, John Brown, am now quite sure that the crimes of this guilty land will never be washed away except with blood." That was a little over a year before the outbreak of the Civil War. He did go to his execution. He was hanged because of the raid on Harper's Ferry. And less than 2 years later, the soldiers marching out to battle were singing John Brown's body. What do we know about John Brown's body from the song? Lies moldering in the grave, but his truth goes marching on. Yes, he's moldered in the grave long since up in Lake Placid, New York, where he had a farm, and which is a state historic site. But do you know that Julia Ward Howe was at the Willard Hotel in Washington, and she heard the troops marching by, singing the song, and was so inspired that she wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And Julia Ward Howe, she knew John Brown. She had met him personally. And her husband was one of the so-called Secret Six who fled to Canada, afraid that he was going to be arrested by the US government. So John Brown, you know what? He grew up here in Hudson. So I thought I really cannot give you chapter and verse of his whole life. There have been well over 100 books written about John Brown. There's nobody else that came out of Hudson that has played such an important role in the history of this country. But John Brown did. He came out of this environment. He lived in Hudson, for heaven's sake. And so I thought that maybe with the help of a trusty assistant, Barbara Marshall, who is sitting nearby, that she will, she's going to help distribute. I have a map of Hudson, Ohio, showing all of the places. Yes, these you can start. Yeah. Kelly is going to help.
I'm going to.
He's going to be Albert. Thank you, Kelly. So I thought instead of trying to do John Brown's story, today, which is an awfully big one, that I would instead share with you this map of Hudson, because you all have family and friends who are coming to visit you. Maybe somebody wants to know something about John Brown and Hudson. So here we are, looking at the map. Do you know that John Brown and his family lived initially right near the intersection of Aurora Street and Route 91. So I have that marked on the map as the original site of the Owen Brown house. That was the house that his father built shortly after their arrival in Hudson, 1805. So John was only 5 years old when they came from Connecticut. So really, all of his boyhood recollections were from here in Hudson. I have shown also where the tannery was on what is now Owen Brown Street. It's where the creek crosses. So there's some houses there now. And the creek is not what it was in the 19th century. But that was where Owen Brown's tannery was. Now, if you follow that creek, Brandywine Creek, north, you will notice where the creek crosses what is now Hines Hill Road was called Chapman Road in the 19th century. John Brown's farm and tannery are located there. The house is still there. This is something many people are not aware of. But John Brown actually built a house for his young family. Diantha Lusk, the Hudson girl that he married at the Congregational Church in 1820. You know what Mrs. Lusk, she was a kind of housekeeper. She hired out to help with people in their homes. And she did John Brown's bachelor's hall up there on Chapman Road. He shared that tannery and the house with his stepbrother, Levi Blakesley. So the two of them were having a bachelor's hall, and they brought in Mrs. Lusk to keep house for them. And she brought her daughter, Diantha, and that was the young woman that John Brown married. Of course, Mrs. Lusk said that John really was not worthy of her daughter, that the Lusks were, after all, related to the Adams family known in Washington, D.C. Whether this is actually true or not, I've not been able to say, but Mrs. Lusk, as a housekeeper, really was not in a position. John Brown actually had a job and was making good money as a tanner. And so he and his young family lived there on Chapman Road, now Hines Hill, for about 6 years before relocating in Pennsylvania. Do you know that John Brown's 3 sons, the 3 oldest sons, John Brown Jr., Jason, and Salmon, were all born there in that house? So there's a lot of connection with Hudson. John Brown was married a Hudson girl, even though she was a member, much elevated over him. He married a Hudson girl in the Hudson church, had built a house here, had the first of his 20 children. First 3 were born up there, Hines Hill Road. So The marsh that I show that used to extend across Route 91, that was all part of John Brown's farm. Years later, I think it was in the 1890s, a son of his, John Brown Jr., who was the oldest boy, remembered going down to that march with his father and seeing fugitive slaves who were on their way north. So they were, in fact, part of the Underground Railroad going north on Route 91 to Lake Erie to cross over into safety. So was John Brown active in the Underground Railroad? Yes, he was. And those fugitives did not have to go underground in order to be safe. They could be safe above ground. And hiding in that marsh area was a good place. Another place that I don't have on the map would be John Brown's brother, who owned the land north of Hines Hill Road. And that was where there was a house built in the 1970s on Ashley Drive. And it was haunted, but it should not have been. It was from the 1970s. And so one day I was called by St. Mary's Parish. And they said, do you have any idea why a house on Ashley would be haunted? So I said, well, tell me again exactly, where is this road? So they told me, and I said, well, John Brown's brother had a large farm there, and it was known that he had a camp for fugitive slaves going north. Look at the map. And so what I think may have been the case, someone died. Maybe more than one of those fugitives died in that camp and were buried there. They had a priest go up to the house to exorcise it. That was just, that's within recent memory. And I think it had to do with John Brown's brother having that camp for fugitives going north. So this is your map that will tell you where to go in Hudson. There is, in fact, a marker down, if you look at Route 91 south of 303, I have marked the Dissenters Church, the building there at that intersection, which now has a lawyer, attorney firm in it. That was the Dissenters Church. That is members from the Congregational Church who thought that the church was not strong enough on anti-slavery matters. And so they formed Dissenters Congregational Church. And you know that was where John Brown spoke in 1859, just before, at the time of 4th of July, he spoke there. So that was one of the reasons why we put the John Brown marker dedicated in 1986 that was put there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I could go on. You can see I'm ready for it, but we have to take a look at this other man. Oh, I think I'll ask Barb and Kelly if they will distribute this. This is a copy of the from the hub about the marker, the John Brown marker. And I was the one who, I not only wrote what's on the marker, but I also gave the talk, which is reprinted here. So you might want to, this will show you exactly what the marker looks like. All right, so anyway, I just want to remind you, you can go over to the Hudson Library and borrow one of the many books about John Brown. First one I read was To Purge This Land with Blood, which is a wonderful book by Stephen Oates, still in print. It's in paperback, but I know that the Hudson Library has that, along with a whole bunch of other ones. So take a look at the wonderful collection that is over there at the library. I could mention that how that got started. Clarence Gee, who was a pastor of the Congregational Church, began collecting John Brown materials in the 1920s. That was 100 years ago. And when I arrived in Hudson to be the director of the Hudson Library, Grace Gouldry-Zant said to me, "You go and get that collection from Dr. Gee because that is going to make Hudson the center of John Brown research." And she was right. So I went there, I went up, he was living in Lockport, New York, and I was able to I got the library board, who was always very reluctant to do anything. I got them to actually pay for moving that collection, giving Dr. Gee, who is a retired minister, an honorarium from it. And that was the nucleus of the big John Brown collection that's at the library today. So my thanks also to Grace Gouldry-Zant. She was quite a person, and she wrote a wonderful book about Hudson, which you can get. It's in paperback, called Hudson's Heritage. And it's over at the Destination Visitor Center, and you can pick up one. I think it's about $13, something like that. It's a wonderful book. So that's John Brown. Going to the next one, the man who saved the day, James W. Ellsworth. So, Barb, can I trouble you again? Also, Kelly. Yes. So, so we have James W. Ellsworth. He was much too young to have known John Brown. He was born 1849 here in Hudson, and his family had been here already for about 30 years. His father built the building that still stands at the corner of East Main and Division Street. It has long been a dental office. It still is today. It had been a dental office for you. It had been a dental office going back to the 1930s. But James W. Ellsworth's father built that as a general store. And young James grew up learning to deal with people in his father's general store. He was born in the house right next to it, which is now on Division Street. It was moved around the corner, number 30 Division Street, where the Gotthards live today. That was the house that James W. Ellsworth was born in. He went on to a tremendous career. He had very little training, but he has a wonderful hand. Of course, all of those documents from the 19th century are written in hand, and he has a beautiful handwriting, which I attribute to the years that he spent as a student at what is now Western Reserve Academy. And that it was there that he picked up the rudiments of arithmetic, science, and he learned how to communicate with others. He went on to a big career in Chicago. Chicago was a coming thing, the city on the move. And Ellsworth married into Chicago society. And by the 1890s, he was one of the principal, most important directors of the Columbian World Exposition, which was held in Chicago 1893. And that was sometimes called the greatest World's Fair ever held, the one in Chicago, 1893. James W. Ellsworth's job as a director of the fair was to go abroad and persuade foreign governments to bring an exhibit to the World's Fair. So he had a chance to go. He was actually commissioned by the State Department. So he carried the same credentials an ambassador would. So he went and called on important people in Europe to send things to the fair. There is an account of James W. Ellsworth in 1891 going up to see the prime minister of the Russian Empire. So he's in St. Petersburg and he has a coach with 4 white horses to pull him up to the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg to meet with the prime minister. It was all very nicely done, but Russia was not going to part with some of the artwork at the Winter Palace there and send it to Chicago. But other countries came, including countries like Korea, which you wouldn't expect would be there, but many exhibited. At the end, Ellsworth continued as an important businessman. His line was coal. That was where he made his initial millions. He bought a castle in Switzerland and a big villa outside of Florence, Italy. He had 2 children. One was polar explorer Lincoln Ellsworth, whose own story is so big, it would require certainly another day, another time, just to tell you everything that he accomplished. The daughter, Claire Ellsworth Prentice, also had a nice life. She married a tennis pro and had a number of children before her untimely death. She was quite young, and I think that she died of some kind of an allergy, a virus that caught her down south. And her brother Lincoln certainly lamented the passing of his sister, 1929. Now, James W. Ellsworth, he decided that he would retire in 1907 and come back to Hudson. And that was when he looked around and he said, you know what? Hudson needs an upgrade. It needs to become the best town in America. And so he set about doing that with his millions of dollars. He is the one who put in the sewage, water and sewage, the electric company, the telephone company. And I know that you're all happy about Altel, um, Windstream, whatever it is. That was something that Ellsworth founded. He founded that as the Western Reserve Telephone Company, and it has morphed into a big national operation. But he had big ideas for Hudson. This is from a New York paper in which they, which was in, I think, 1908. Glorious dreams of the good people of Hudson, Ohio, who see visions of an earthly heaven. Millionaire Ellsworth is building a real spotless town. And they show him in this caricature. He's like the man in the Monopoly game, moving around buildings, making it the perfect town that it was destined to become. So here it is. I think I'll pass this around just so you can see it. Yeah. So you can see that, but that was part of what Ellsworth planned for this community. And he did, in fact, raise the mortgage on Western Reserve Academy, reopened the school, built what is now Ellsworth Hall, renovated the building that we call Hayden Hall, built Seymour Hall. He had them all, he built the gym on the campus of WRA, all of them named for people he admired. And he told the board at the academy, I don't want something named for me. I just want to be in the background. And so it was the building over on the campus of WRA that's called Ellsworth Hall today was originally Cutler Hall. So 25 years after Ellsworth passed away, the trustees decided to rename that building after their great benefactor. So a lot was done both in Hudson. The infrastructure of this community owes much to the work of James W. Ellsworth. Of course, he built the clock tower. He built what was known, what we used to call the Saywells building. I think that the Saywells still own that building, but it has an art gallery and a coffee shop in it on the ground floor, offices upstairs. All of that was Ellsworth's work because he wanted downtown to look beautiful. He also bought and renovated the bank building on the corner of Aurora and North Main, which has just undergone a huge renovation by its current owner, who has said privately, I'm the new James W. Ellsworth. He does own a lot of things here in Hudson. So Ellsworth's, his influence on this community really should not be underestimated. Unlike John Brown, there's been very few books written about Ellsworth and all that he did. His son, Lincoln, put out a wonderful book about his father in the 1930s. I just wanted to show you that I took a portion of it and made a booklet of it because we were having a history of RA at the school. So from Lincoln's, I was able to get the whole chapter, couple of chapters put into this booklet. And we then distributed this to the students. So that it includes many photos of Claire Ellsworth Prentice, her son Sheldon, and Lincoln Ellsworth, the telegrams he got after he successfully went across the North Pole. So it's too bad this book or something like it is not available in print at the visitor center. But Ellsworth, I think he probably would have not been unhappy about being the man behind things. I know you're all concerned about whether Ellsworth was a nice father. Well, he wasn't a warm and fuzzy kind of father. You know that we have one of the Christmas cards that he sent to his son, Lincoln. This would have been, I guess, in the early 1920s. And it is signed James W. Ellsworth. So I thought he could have put something else, but instead he had his entire signature. No warm and fuzzy sentiments there. But before he died, he gave his son, Lincoln, $1.2 million in cash. This was in the 1920s. That would have been worth, like, I think, $25 million today. So he got the cash plus the big castle in Switzerland that had belonged to the Habsburg family, who used to be emperors of Austria. It's a great big one. It's in Schloss Lenzburg. It's in Lenzburg, Switzerland. So the son did pretty well. What about the poor daughter, Claire? Well, do you know what? He gave her also $1.2 million in cash. And she got the villa in Italy, Villa Palmieri. Really, I think I would have taken that one in preference to the big castle in Switzerland. And her family, the Prentices, kept that villa in Florence until recent years when they sold it. But during both World War I and World War II, it was used by the Italian government Red Cross. And hard to believe, but our James W. Ellsworth was decorated by the Kingdom of Italy for his contributions during World War I. So I didn't really cover much about these two giant figures, but I know that their names come up pretty often in just general talk about Hudson and why it is the way it is. So I hope that this gave you some idea of the two figures that straddle Hudson's history. And I should mention, because I know the mayor would want me to remind you that this is also the 225th anniversary of Hudson. Hudson's founded by David Hudson, 1799. So it's been 225 years. And you know that the image of David Hudson that is on those flyers, those things are hanging from the posts as you go into downtown Hudson. That is based on a portrait owned by Western Reserve Academy. That was the portrait that was thrown out years ago, ended up at an antique shop in Florida. People from Chagrin Falls bought the framed item. They didn't know who the man was, but they liked old things. They brought it back. They took it to Bonfoy Gallery, and when they removed the frame, the conservator said to them, "Well, very nice that you have this portrait of David Hudson, founder of Hudson, Ohio." And so these people said, "Well, we didn't know who it was. We just bought it because we liked it." And so they had it. They did have it restored, and in the 1990s decided to give it to Western Reserve Academy, where it had been initially in the 1850s. So it was the college that moved to Cleveland that is now known as Case Western Reserve University that threw the portrait out. They decided they didn't know who it was anymore, or they didn't care about it, and that was why it ended up in Florida. I'm very happy to say that we have it back, have had it for the last 30 years. It is now hanging near the archives, and I did have both the mayor and city manager, Tom Sheridan, come over to the school so they could actually see the portrait that they were using for this anniversary year 225. So thank you all very much for your attention. Thank you for your invitation to speak. If you have questions or comments, I did bring a lot of pictures that I think it would have been difficult to try to pass those around, but I have them in case you want to. I would be happy to share those with you. Meantime, I'm going to turn this back over to Kelly Brennan.
Tom, on behalf of the Hudson Rotary Club, I wanted to bring you up to date with the newest pin.
The newest.
The newest pin. I'm sure you have quite a few of those, I imagine. Most people don't realize Tom was a member of the Rotary Club of Hudson for many years. You were president in which year? Do you remember?
89.
In 89 and 90. So thank you very, very much. I think we might have a few minutes if anyone has questions for Tom. Do you mind taking it? Oh. Any questions? Is that working? Oh, I turned it off.
I understand Ellsworth had a pretty extensive mansion here in town. And is it a shame that it was destroyed?
Yes, you are referring to the Ellsworth Mansion that used to stand on back from Aurora Street. The only thing that remains is the gatehouse. It's there at the corner of Aurora and Hudson Street. And there's also a partial wall that used to enclose the whole Evamere estate. Yes, Ellsworth had a big mansion. It was originally a farmhouse. The family had owned that land, and then when Ellsworth first became a widower, he did marry a second time. Oh, and I'm not going to tell you about the relatives who thought their great-grandmother made a mistake, sort of like Diantha Lusk's mother. The relatives in Boston thought it was too bad that their great-grandmother married this man from Ohio. as if he couldn't. And he actually employed he employed members of that family, but he didn't have the credentials that they had in Boston. At least that was her feeling. Yes, he did expand that old farmhouse, made it into a beautiful Queen Anne style mansion that he occupied, and that went as part of everything that he gave to Western Reserve Academy, which was everything he owned at the time of his death. He had already made that arrangement with his two children. Do you know the school had that until the early 1950s, used it as a faculty residence, used it as they had classrooms over there. They decided that it was more practical for the school to sell that land, to tear the old mansion down, and to sell the land to the Hudson School Board, which they did. So a mansion that rivaled Stan Hewitt Hall was dismantled by the school that I represent in 1951. There was no Heritage Association. There was no one really to speak up at that time. So the mansion went and the land was sold first for development along Evermere Lane and Bicknell Drive, houses there. Then the back part was sold to the school board. Eventually, they put in Hayden Parkway, which is also named for a headmaster of Western Reserve Academy, on our former land, now owned by the city. I think Hudson City really made out in that one. I think that was a good move, that they were there to buy that land at that time. But unfortunately, we lost the mansion.
Yes. Okay. One minute. I got a question down here, and then we'll get you the microphone.
Is there a way to access the archives at Western Reserve? Is there archives at Western Reserve Academy?
Oh, yes, you can just come over to the John Ong Library, which is open daily until 9:45. I can't speak for what the archivist will be, but you are welcome to come. If you come at a time when someone is there, they can look up whatever you want. Yes.
Recently, I watched them dismantle the flood barn there on Barlow Road. And I understand that it's going to be rebuilt or reassembled someplace else here in Hudson. Do you know where?
No, I do not know. Is this the barn
The red barn that was behind or close to the house?
at the flood property?
Yeah. The flood
Yes, that one. I don't know what is to become of
barn.
that.
Some research.
But that has happened with too many barns in Hudson, where they have been dismantled. It was said that it was going to be rebuilt, and they never were. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that one. Here. Okay, this.
I just wanted to say hello to Tom because I had worked with him at the
Yes.
archives and the Western Reserve Academy for a
For-
while.
Yes, for a while,
For a
and
while,
came
we were down
came
in
into the
basement
archives.
somewhere.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
remember?
Well, of course. And your immediate boss, Leonard Carlson, was so wonderful about the archives. He was sympathetic. He made possible the track shelving that we have over there right now. And I'm happy to say I was the winner of the Len Carlson Award
Wonderful.
this year.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
So-
Len was a wonderful boss. I had him
Yes.
for
He was a
30
great
years
guy.
in the business office at the
Yes.
academy, and he was the best of bosses.
He was a
Yes.
great guy.
He was 15 years younger than me, so it was a kind of an interesting relationship, but we always got along very, very well, and he did a lot for the academy.
He really did,
Yes.
because he was there for many years. We're talking about Leonard Carlson, who was business manager for the school. So thank you all very much for your attention. And I will stay around in case you want to come forward and ask more questions,
Just want
whatever.
to give one bit of information. The wood of that barn was bought by the Hudson schools. And they're going to use it. I don't know if they're going to build a barn, but they're going to use some kind of pavilion at one of the schools.
Oh, all right. And so you're answering the question that came from the back.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Special thank goes out to Dale Smith, who is our district governor from 6630. Thanks to all the Rotarians and to all the individuals that came in as guests to listen to Tom's speech. Now it gets kind of boring because this is more Rotary Club kind of stuff. But you're welcome to stay and listen to the boring stuff. For Rotarians, Hudson Mart, 728. If you haven't signed up, see Pat. Beer Garden is scheduled for the 9th and 10th of August. If you haven't signed up, see Pat. The Rotary Picnic, I believe Dave and Mimi are kind of working on that. It is scheduled for the 14th of August. Time is TBA at this point in time. All members would bring a side dish. We will provide the main course. There'll be an officers meeting on the 7th of August. That's the first week in August. And I believe a foundation meeting the week following. I don't know what the date, 7 days, 14th. And to bring us to a conclusion, useless but important facts. So these are things that you're going to hear. You guys are going to be so educated by the time this Rotary year is out. There are 293 different ways to make change for $1. You're going to need that somewhere down the road. I'm guarantee it. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon. We will see everybody here next week at our normal time. Thank you.